Ethics actually does not even need to be good. In a way, if your ethics is not the same as my ethics, then does it mean one of us are good or bad?
For us technologists, when we build this system, sometimes we push these applications with open defects. Sometimes they're known, and sometimes they could be unknown defects.
We're also building platforms that are being used by AI agents. So we have MCP servers, all those tools. So you're not building for humans anymore.
A business will always need profit to fund its operation. Trust is going to be like the highest form of currency that we're gonna have in the next decade. Because if everyone can build, then who should you trust?
For someone who's not in tech, a user, how can they contribute? Can they contribute to a responsible AI world?
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Lumpia Bites. We are in part 2 of our episode with Carol C., a Filipino tech AI ethicist, and she went all the way to London to study it. If you want to learn more from Carol, her background, her career, her choices, go to part 1. The link will be down in the description below. Now, welcome into part 2, where we will deep dive into ethics, responsibility, and human centered design. So, without further ado, let's go dive deep into it. Can you walk us through the basics? Can you make me understand what is AI ethics, what is human centered design in your own words?
When we say AI ethics, it's really value driven and it's dependent on who you are and how you think you should contribute to humanity. It's very broad, but in a way, it's really about what we want out there in the real world, digital or physical.
And when we say AI ethics versus responsible AI, safe AI, we're hearing like so many combination of words. There's safe AI, there's responsible AI, there's ethical AI. What do these terminologies mean? What's the difference?
Overall, I think ethics is coming from a very philosophical description. So, like, obviously, different nationalities, different cultures have different ethical perspectives. It's very sociological in a way. Responsible AI, I think that's where the technological guardrails are coming into play. So, like governance, safety, how are countries policing AI or technologies overall. So that's kind of the segregation is one is more governance and politics policies, the other is more value driven of even if it's not being policed by government, what do you want to be pushed out?
Carol, I'm gonna role play right now, and I'm that confused data privacy person in the office, for example. Where does data privacy fall into this cloud of responsibility, safety, and ethics?
So if you have a company, usually you have your vision mission, right? Who you are, what you do, what you offer, what's your unique value proposition. Most likely that's kind of your company ethics. It's rooted on, are you a family business? Are you entrepreneurial? Is your goals to contribute to the job market or is your goals to earn as much money as you can? That's your company ethics, right? Governance, data, responsible AI, it's more about how are we ensuring that HIPAA is not being violated? How are we gathering information from our customers? So it's more to do with being responsible with the governance that's already in play. Ethics actually does not even need to be good. In a way, like as mentioned, if your ethics is not the same as my ethics, then does it mean one of us are good or bad? So that's why it's more of a philosophical hullabaloo. If we say responsible AI, it's more straightforward of these are the rules that we need to be encased in. For data, it's gonna be more about how are we getting information, how are we converting the information, how are we utilizing the data of the people, how are we sharing it with other people. Like if you're Facebook, you get the information. How are you getting information, right? Did they approve to you getting the information? If they just spoke, like they're walking down the street and they said, I want to try Jollibee. The phone picks it up. Is it responsible for you to use that information if they didn't consent to giving you that information? They were talking to their friend, not to their phone, right? Once you have that information, do you process it with your learning data? That's kind of the responsible side to it because it's not rooted on the ethics of like civilization, right? It's just what's right or wrong.
Human centered. Everybody's talking about AI first. Most CEOs are saying, I want to be AI first, AI native, AI powered, right? Everybody's AI. That's what they want to report to the board. But there is a unique differentiator that's actually gonna, in my opinion, help companies grow in the long term, which is human centered design. How do you think, where does human first or human centered fit into the picture of all of this?
From my perspective, so coming from a product management perspective, it's actually straightforward to think about human centered because we go back to the roots of how do we design. We go to our customers, right? We understand our users, what are their needs, what's their problem statement. Be obsessed with the problem is the quote test quote that product managers always have. And how do you actually understand where they're coming from? So if you're in marketing, there's that thing of like day in the life as well, right? Like you understand where they are at certain points in the day. That's being human centered because then you understand the touch points that they're at. One of the defining differences of if you're not doing it well, you might be someone who's using AI just for the sake of it. So you can ask AI to give you the whole workflow. You can ask AI to make the assumptions of your customer base. Then you build a platform based on the problem statement that AI has given you. You're not human centered because you just solved the problem of the AI chatbot, not really of a person, right? So ensuring that humanity is still part of your learning, part of your iterating and your agile processes is how it should be in my perspective.
Carol, let's role play. I'm an impatient CEO that I just want to build so that I could report to the board. What happens if I don't put humans at the center of my platform?
At this stage, I think so what might happen is you're gonna be able to release. So it's speed versus accuracy in terms of the problem statement that you're working on. I actually can't determine, right, who's gonna win the race in terms of because I with agile, it's iteration is the key to getting to your end state. So if AI is able to iterate 20 iterations in 2 weeks versus a team of humans iterating every 2 weeks, there may be a chance that the AI would win. If it's actually learning from the data points as well. So if you're using Google Analytics to track all the activity that people are doing, then you might be able to actually win. But that still makes you human centered, right? Because then you're still learning from the data, you're still capitalizing on your market. But I think one of the issues that we're also seeing is everyone's gonna do it the same way. So then your differentiator is not gonna be there anymore because you're just building something that has been predefined. This is a current limitation of LLMs. Since it's very historical data. But again, it might change in the next 2 years of maybe AI might be better at predicting rather than just utilizing historical data. So yeah, either can still win at this point.
Where my mind is at, Carol, is like if I was a startup founder or a leader trying to build an AI powered platform right now, what happens to my user retention if we build something that's not human centered or not responsible at the start?
So I guess for me personally, that's where the ethics side comes into play of like you can as mentioned, like we don't even know who's gonna win the race when it comes to software development, right? But as a founder, do you really want to build a solution that is just generating like fulfillment is not gonna be there at the end of the day, right? So it all boils down to what are your value statements and are you willing to put that at risk by utilizing AI? Um, there might be people who want that, right? Who just want to build and then retire after 10 days. Maybe that's doable, but people innately want something more, right? Do we want something to contribute to society, to humanity, ensure that the environment is being taken care of? It's not going to be the most rewarding path, but after 1 year, maybe you'd be like, you know what? I want to create more jobs and not just release a software that AI agents will be using. Because that's also one of the issues with product management now is we're also building platforms that are being used by AI agents. So we have MCP servers, all those tools. So you're not building for humans anymore. Like one of the key selling point is you're actually selling to AI agents. But where's the fun in that, right? Like
Mhm.
where's your humanity in that? That's kind of where the ethics side comes into play.
Wow, great points, Carol. In your perspective, which company do you think is doing responsible AI right?
Huh.
Which do you think, like, I know everything here is a gray area until a scandal. Until a data scandal or a data leak pops up somewhere in the dark web that they sold our data or that the company flopped and then suddenly the insurance company has all of our DNA data or something like that, right? But in your opinion, do you have any examples of like, yeah, this one is doing it right, this one is a good path that if they continue this trajectory, this is like a good case study of where responsibility and ethics and human centeredness goes well.
For AI, I don't know if I can think of any, but for sustainability companies, I think the one that's been top of mind with a lot of people is how Patagonia is running things of like your corporate sustainability structure is really for the environment and sustainability. They don't, as far as I recall, like it was part of their board members, right? Like environment is part of their board member, which is what I think should be how companies should be doing things now is it shouldn't be the five board members who are just here to earn money.
So basically, when we talk about AI ethics, it's knowing what's the right thing to do, while responsible AI is more of how can we do that, or how can we how do we do the right things. So it's like AI ethics, it's the big umbrella, and then under that responsible AI, it's now how do you really implement that, how do you be fair, those guardrails, how do you implement safety, through those, whether it's governance or compliance and all those things. So those are really good points. And you mentioned earlier, Mooch, about what's going to happen if people don't look at ethics. And remember, which we kind of talk about this on our another episode as well, previous episode, where there's going to be a backlash on companies, right? If you're a business and people started using your system, and then they see, oh, this is bias, right? Oh, this is not fair, they're going to lose trust. You're going to start seeing backlash from your clients, and definitely it's going to be loss of business value for you. And I think for country leaders, for example, tech leaders started losing sight of people. I think people is going to revolt. I know this is more of like I don't want to be fear mongering or being pessimistic on it, but we've seeing a lot of impact on society, on people of AI losing jobs, mental health, and all other societal issues that it could bring, the control of information, democracy, and all those things. And I feel like when people sees that, experience that, it's going to cause backlash, not just from business, but more on the country level. There's going to be a lot of revolt. And the reason why I mentioned this, because there's been a rise of, I could say, socialism here in the US, right? That a lot of people have been revolting around AI, right? And I think it's hard to be too extreme on one side and too extreme on the other side. But I guess overall the call is to build responsibly, right? It's not about stopping innovation. It's not about stopping using technology to make lives better, but it's really about really putting people first, like what you said, right? So anyway, segue to that one is speed versus ethics, because race is always about speed. Why do you guys think, Much? Feel free to jump in as well here as well, because you founded a company, right? Why is it so hard to balance right now? It's always the priority is always around speed and agile. You mentioned about being agile. It's like the core of technology implementations, right? We got to be agile first. But why is it so hard to look at AI ethics right now?
It's really not the front and center for most businesses because obviously we grew up knowing that you make a business to sustain your life, right? Like that's mostly how we were raised. And I think most people start businesses because they want the income or the monetary return. But I do think we are in a more privileged background at this point to actually even be talking about creating a value driven company, right? For us to say we already know the maximum amount of money I need per month and I don't need billions of dollars. Um, that's not something everyone can probably say at this point. And yeah, I do think it's not something everyone would find interesting or would actually have the liberty to hear, right? It's probably the same as religion. Like some people probably never heard of why certain things are happening, and it's not even about ignorance. It's just not in their circle, right? Or it's just not in their vicinity. That's why it is more important for us to be talking about it to make people more aware of how do we actually improve ourselves, our society, and that we all have the capability to change.
Great question, G. This is also the reason why I went to Carol to consult to Carol for for our startup Gia. So just to give kind of everyone an insight on how, and of course, like keep us honest here. We're not perfect. No startup is perfect, right? Everything is in the gray area. It's never a black and white decision. There is no fork in the road that this is good and this is evil. It's always a maybe. Should we be doing this? Are we allowed to do this? Because it's a new frontier, right? It's always a gray area. But at the start of building this startup, we decided we had a philosophical conversation. Like it was a values driven, principles based conversation that what type of company did we want to build? What type of platform did we want to build? How are we going to make sure that we have profit that could sustain all of this? Because it cannot be all principles, right? A business will always need profit to fund its operation. So it was like, okay, how do we make purposeful profit while keeping our principles intact? When we decided to prioritize safety, responsibility, and ethics at the core of our platform, Gia, it was because it was the harder thing to do. How do we build the hard things first so that we have it at the core, and that if there is a Tom, Dick, or Harry who wants to build one, then we've already done the hard work like 2 years in advance. So that's kind of like the thinking. And that's also why I encourage companies and startups to really do the hard things first. Because I know it's the boring work that would it's so boring, right? To say people, let's put ethics at the center of it, or responsibility, or let's be responsible with how we handle our customers' data. But when I talk to my students, and like I do like detailed assessments with my students, with who are entrepreneurs and business owners, and they can get really open with their problems as a business. But you know what? The biggest thing that I've heard from students is that when they tell me, Much, I'm sharing this with you because I trust you. It's not just a unique selling proposition, it's the biggest strength of a company if they trust you in the long run. And to me, trust is the greatest marketing. It's not just a marketing comms thing, but it's what differentiates you compared to all the rest of the Tom, Dick, and Harry who will be here for the hype cycle. Because the hype cycle, we're at the start of the hype cycle, probably like 2 years in or 3 years in the hype cycle. We're not even at the peak of the hype cycle yet. So more companies are going to gremlin from and mushroom. When it rains, the gremlins will soar and more mushroom startups will come. But the way that I'm thinking about it is how do we build platforms and companies that would last us 10 years? So that's why it's so important to me to have this conversation with Carol. That's why I see Carol as a genius, because Carol did not just come from a technical background. She did product and now she's doing ethics. And I think that's really the trinity that we need in terms of talent and people in startups now.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, just to give a long answer to that question, G.
That's a good one. In short, Much is looking for the gourmet, not the fast food.
Yeah,
Which really makes sense because in an AI world, ideas is going to be cheap. Even coding right now, applications, you can do vibe code. But if your application is safe, if your application is ethical, these are the value add that people will really, really appreciate, right? That look for in this if you're thinking long term game. So which is good. So let's make this practical. For people watching. Um, if you're tech professionals, right, and you see ethical red flags in your organization or in your company, what should they do? If you're building something, you're a developer, and oh, there's this is gonna cause a lot of bias. Are we gonna release this? Are we gonna push for this? I mean, what's your advice?
The entire software development lifecycle, there's 100, like, there's usually like 20, at least 10 to 15 people who are building it, right? And one of the classes or conversations we had is who is accountable for the situation. If a robot shoots someone, is it the person who put the algorithm in place? Or is it the developer who built it? Or is it the XY, whoever, the tester who actually did it? Everyone has a role in it, right? And I think developers, they usually are they're not as open about anything. And coming from a software development background, being around a lot of software engineers, I think I always tell them that you should still know what your values are because you're still someone, right? Um, it's definitely a conversation that I usually have with my own engineers, but it's not everyone who would do it, right?
It's going to take a lot of courage from you, I guess,
Yeah.
to speak up, right? But I think bottom line is you mentioned like don't forget about your values. This is a very good point because if you're technical, sometimes we just tend to just get things done, right?
Just to add, one of my favorite sprint retro activities before when I was managing software engineers was I actually gave them the SDG goals. Like this is year end retro, and I gave them the SDG goals, and I'm like, choose one and create a 50-word essay, right? And I'm like, just look at the list and figure out what is your main like value, right? Among this chart. And I'm like, you know what? Everyone has, because mine is sustainability. And I'm like, that's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but you should have something, right? Just have one.
It becomes a philosophical exercise at this point.
Yeah. Hey, engineers, write an essay. They're like, what?
Yeah. But you know what? I think, learning from our past episodes when we had discussions with, leaders that are well respected in the Philippine industry, it's so surprising that they started their organizations with really philosophical conversation. And I think all the best people are not just purely technical or purely money driven, but they're deeply philosophical in how we build organizations. And I think these are the organizations that last, right? As opposed to startups that peak and then crash burning to the ground like a like a comet from space origins or something, right?
For people who's not in tech as well, who's watching us, I think it's important to know that these systems, AI system, for example, AI applications, right? For us technologists, when we build this system, sometimes we push these applications with open defects. Right? There's some known issues. Sometimes they're known, and sometimes they could be unknown defects. Maybe be skeptical in a way, like the discernment. Don't treat it as 100% sure. Don't treat this as really the Bible of everything, like think just drink through it, discernment still, because these are still technologies that could have issues.
Before we jump to the next segment, I just made this like diagram. I just made this diagram that you cannot see where the trinity of Carol's knowledge base and expertise, and where I really think product development. And actually, I think the future leader should have this skill. Like the future CTO definitely would have the future CTO, the future CIO. These are the necessary skills that, Carol, wow, you've definitely collected for yourself because you started really technical, right? Really super technical computer science nosebleed looking at AI from 20 years ago when nobody was looking at it. When it was a hard endeavor. When it wasn't as instant as ChatGPT is now. you were already looking at AI, so that technical mastery and foundation is really with you. Thank you so much for participating. I'm not closing this podcast in any way, but I'm just like appreciating the work behind all of that. So now I want to zoom into the hidden bias of credit scoring and kind of dissect your dissertation, aka thesis. Can you explain to us your dissertation in like what was it? What was the problem that you're trying to solve? What problem did you see?
Because I had some experience in banking, or a little bit of product management experience in banking. And there was that huge interest when it comes to the unbanked population in the Philippines that everyone's trying to tap. How do you make people get on your platforms? Because there's like 70% unbanked, right? But now it's gotten lower because of GCash, Paymaya, and all that. But that obviously came with a certain number of risks. Now we have a lot of the alternate credit score system, because a lot of the Filipinos, even if they're now banked, they still don't have credit history, right? Even me, I don't think I have that much of a credit history, because we were taught to always pay our debt, right? So we don't have that like long history of just paying the minimum of your credit score or whatnot to improve your credit score. We were never taught that. So because of that, a lot of companies are going to the Philippines to like create alternate credit scores. So one of the main one was like, I think Tala uses your Android app utilization. So what apps are you using? How long do you spend on specific apps? Those kinds of things is what determines your credit score, right? So it's like, oh, that's interesting, which I guess it's like, okay, that kind of makes sense because we want people to even have a certain level of a credit score, right? But I guess the question of, are people even aware that they're being scored or judged based on their app utilization? That was the one question. The other was, I also observed that like Shopee or all our shopping info apps are now leaning to giving out credit. So like Shopee has Shopee Pay, because they now have a bank. So I wanted to look into that of like, based on your shopping information, are you getting a specific credit score? And if that's being used, are we actually limiting the gender profiles of like, we know that certain products are being bought by female, certain products are being bought by male. So are we actually determining their gender based on those credit scores? And are we giving a fair advantage to the underprivileged, aka the women in the Philippines? Because we're judging them based on their shopping history.
Just for the listeners out there, especially if you're in Manila, we don't have a like a unified credit score like in the EU has a credit score, right, Carol?
I
And
guess
in
so.
the US, yeah, the US is based on a credit score. Like a credit score is it's both a very empowering and a not empowering thing. But if you know how it works, you can do a lot of things with a good credit score. Like you can borrow in any bank with a good credit score. It's a very meritocracy type of thing, meaning you don't have to have a special relationship. You don't have to have a high position or a special relationship with the bank manager to get a certain interest on a loan. If you have a high credit score, that's it. That's all you need. And you can get your credit card, you can get a loan, you can get whatever it is you want. But if you have a low credit score, then you wouldn't be able to do, you'd have the worst interest rates, you'd have the worst type of loans, right? You wouldn't be as empowered. But if you know how to manage your credit score right, correctly, you'd be able to succeed with zero. Meaning, you don't have to be a very powerful person in a corporation, but you'd be able to start something, right, with a good credit score. What were you seeing in this industry that really stood out to you that you wanted to fix and solve?
So yeah, finding a dissertation topic was a journey on its own. You go from one topic to the other, us. We always want to solve the world. I think because throughout the year, I have been working a lot with like data bias. So one of my first papers for data ethics was recidivism. How are communities being judged based on their location, neighborhood, who their friends are? Am I gonna commit a crime somewhere in my lifetime just because one of my neighbors committed a crime 2 years before me, right? So those kinds of things. And with these AI platforms, there's obviously that profiling as well. one of the things is you are now not allowed to put your race in your profiles, right? Because then it brings up bias. But they're not seeing that even their neighborhood is becoming a bias because the same racial profiles are living in the same neighborhoods. And then because of that, there's that learning loop that happens of like because there are two people who committed crime here, now they're gonna put the police there, so more crimes are being caught there, and now you think that this neighborhood is one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. um so I was working more towards data risks and data ethics, which led to what are the situations going on in the Philippines. And again, credit risk scoring is one of the most not looked into. Like we know that only the privileged are able to get banking loans, right? But when you look at their company, how they look at companies, they also judge who is the founder, what has he done in the past 2 years, how is he gonna be able to repay? So there's still that element of judging people, even for companies who are quote unquote successful already, right? So what more for those who don't even have anything? They just pay by cash for the past years of their lives.
So in the Philippines, you have to be part of the top four schools, right? There's already a bias. Like there is a cultural bias that exists in the Philippines, which is if you come from the top four schools, all opportunities are open to you, right? If you work in the top 1,000 corporations, you will get a job anywhere. But what if you're not? And a credit score is supposed to empower people who does not necessarily come from the most privileged areas in the Philippines. It's supposed to empower a good payer with a good credit history, regardless of race, regardless of where they come from, which family, which position they come from, to be able to get a loan to start school, to start a business. And these loans are supposed to be friendlier if you're a good payer, if you have a good score. And it's objective. It's not relationship based. It's not power based. It's not position based. It's not may kakilala ka dito or you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that would give you a good interest rate, right? It's the basis of a meritocracy society. It removes that cultural bias. But there can be bias in the data. So I guess that's where you're focusing and you're focusing, Carol. And maybe I want to zoom into this that Gcash, Paymaya, these weren't existing 10 years ago, right? It's only a matter of time before credit scoring becomes a normal thing in the Philippines. So now, as a listener, as a viewer of this podcast, what should I demand from these companies that want to start scoring me? And what data of mine are they looking at in order to score me? Because there could be a lot of bias in that data.
It's gonna be interesting because that's also how it is going. So when you look at Gcash, it actually does have the G score now, right? And I guess that was one of the questions I also thought about was it came from somewhere, right? And when you swipe with your Gcash, it knows what you bought. It knows what kind of industry or business you bought from. I think with BPI, so I have my credit card and they had this promo one time of
Yeah.
if you bought a certain amount, then you get a certain coupon. But if you bought
Mhm.
from 5 different industries, so like restaurant, travel, hotel, then you get like an extra 1,000 pesos or something, right?
Mhm.
So they know where you're buying, they know each item you're purchasing. And is that being used against or for you? That's gonna be interesting, right? And I wouldn't, I mean, obviously, if you're trying to hide something, you still want to use
Yeah.
cash.
Yeah.
So I do think they are gonna use it. They're gonna use your information, your shopping information, based on to determine your credit score, and you might want them to not do that, but honesty, anywhere in the world, that's already how things are. So if you're shopping in a grocery here, everything's already listed down in your loyalty apps as well, right?
Yeah. What's the problem? Carol, if there's no transparency and there's no regulation with scoring credit?
It's you might not get it, right? Like, so that's really the risk of, I don't think it's about what is the company doing. It's more about, do you know what your credit score is coming from? And it's gonna be harder to even fight the system. Like, let's say you have a high interest rate. How are you even gonna defend yourself? Because the bankers will just say, that's what the app is telling me, right? But when there's accountability, then you can actually see that I think I'm getting this kind of credit score because X, Y, and Z. Then you might be able to contest and get a better score, get a better system. So having those things in place is actually valuable. But so I
Yeah.
guess just to drop, one of my favorite books recently was Weapons of Mass Destruction. I don't know if you guys have read it. It was
I
so
Scary.
haven't.
interesting. So interesting. But because one of the again, like the loop, right? Of like one of the things is you want transparency, but you will also have people who will game the system to get, like, let's say they know that if they shop from X number of things, then they know that that would increase their credit score. So then companies would need to adopt and change their logic or algorithm because people are gaming the system. So it's chicken and egg. That's going to be a problem.
Wow, definitely opens up a lot of potential for potential fraud. But at the same time, if you're a user, it could also, what's that word? Discriminate you.
Yeah.
Because if the credit scoring mechanics isn't transparent, then you could be discriminated against, right? Good if you're privileged, good if you come from a good family, have a good background, have cash in the bank, that's good for you if you're a privileged person. But if you're not from a privileged background, then it could be double bad for you. Which is why I think people should demand transparency in how they're being scored because there's no transparency right now. I'm not sure what you saw in your dissertation, but what realizations did you see in your research, Carol?
There's definitely bias, right? Like there's definitely a way to determine who you are as a person. When you look at the governance policies today, they require that you don't put gender as your part of your model when you're doing credit risk scoring. Most companies will literally just drop the gender column, right? But even with that, I was able to determine the genders based on their shopping information. So now, as a company that values equity, you can adjust your models to, okay, now that you know that the female population are getting 20% higher interest rates than the male, maybe you should adjust the model to be like times point two so that you now have an equal representation of both and they would get like people who you think are equivalent to the male counterparts would have the same opportunities as the male counterparts. It's not about removing bias. So I think what I was able to determine is bias is always going to be there, but how are we going to make it fair for both population is just the way to do it at this point.
Is it possible, Carol, to build a solution, a system, a software that kind of rate the bias of not just an AI system, but maybe an AI company at some point? Because there's going to be a lot of AI companies, right, popping up. How difficult do you think it's going to be, or maybe it's already existing, like a system where we can there's like a score for this AI system. They're using this model and all this data, and then the system will kind of output. This is our ethics score. I don't know what to call it, but it's like a scoring system that people in public can see.
Yeah, for bias, so I used FairLearn. Basically, it looks into your models, and if you're trying to observe the male and female, or at least gender, then you would see that there is, let's say, positive and negative. So for me, it was what's the percentage of male that's getting approved for loans, and what's the percentage of female that's getting approved for loans, and then you score that, right? So if it's 30% male but only 20% female, then you might want to adjust to add a multiplier to the female. So for bias specifically, there's already a specific tool or a certain set of tools. For ethics, I feel like so one of my core pillars is because I came from the cloud management space. There is the AWS well architected review that has a holistic approach of how do you build tech systems, right? Like you want it secure, sustainable, operationally excellent, all that. So AI would have those same, not the same, but will have the same score sheet for
Mhm.
different paths. I believe that's gonna be how it's gonna go. Like it's very similar to how it's currently being benchmarked.
And I think it's going to be helpful for users eventually in the future, right? Where there's going to be a lot of AI application tools, options, but at least you know what you're using, right? Similar to like when you buy food, you see ingredients, right? Or the number of calories in there or ingredients, if it's organic or what. And this is more like transparency. Oh, this is the AI organization, the tool. This is how ethical they are, right? From the implementation to the algorithm itself. One specific scenario as well, and not just about credit scoring. If a lot of Filipinos cannot appreciate credit scoring yet, hiring, for example, right? AI is going to be used on a lot of HR system, hiring system, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard about the lawsuit on Workday. We all know Workday, right? At some point, maybe we applied on a company using Workday, and there's a ongoing lawsuit right now about the bias on the AI system that I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can put it in the link here. But people 40 years of age above are being discriminated because of their age. It's a milestone because it's not just one person, two persons. I think there's thousands of people affected on that one. And just imagine that, right? Taking away that opportunity for you to be able to land that job, right? It's hard. I mean, in all these AI system, it's going to be all industries. And if we don't focus on the AI ethics, the bias, the fairness, I can't imagine what the world would be.
Yeah, I think one that recently popped up is LinkedIn. That if you have female as your gender, then you actually have less views than if you change your gender to male. So it's like, oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
Like, oh, what?
I should change my gender then.
Apparently. Well, I guess
FYI, I'm transitioning. I'm gonna be male in social media.
One last question before we close on this one. These AI systems could be biased, these technology, but people itself can be biased as well. People in general is biased as well. Even if the resume is being reviewed by someone, a person, they could be biased too. What's your take on that one? Like,
yeah, I do think that's also true. So I think one of the things that I actually saw was for resumes. Like people are saying you have to change your resume for every job you want. And then going into the other side of the recruitment side of like, oh, we're actually stripping resumes to just the important things because we don't want to be biased. So it's like, so what do we do? Right? So what are you talking about? But yeah, and that's how AI learned, right? AI learned from human bias. So there might even be a point where AI might be better at having equitable opportunities. But if we're giving it biased data, then
it's
it
true.
still won't be biased.
I like that. If this technology is going to change how we work, improve better lives, then we have to start now. Then like social media where we've been like too late to understand the negative implications. I think for AI at least, this is a good time. Before we close, I guess advice to first founders and also builders and also tech professionals. What framework, I'd say, if you have like a simple framework that they can follow to build AI responsibly.
Well, me personally, what I'm fascinated with is the value systems design. Because I guess looking back as a person doing corporate strategy before or like business for automation, you always have that like canvas, right? Of like this is the company, these are the goals, this is our benefit, this is what how much we're gonna profit and everything. But when you look at the value system design, they also look into like who are the customers, who is the business, how is it impacting society, how is it impacting human needs, third layer of like if you have your customers, their neighbors are also affected, the neighborhood that you're building your data centers in, all of that needs to be factored in, not just the risk of your business. So yeah, value systems design.
For project managers, product managers, engineers, what's your advice to all these people who's in the front line of everything?
One of the guiding pillars, right? Like if you're building your even for product managers, we also use AI canvases. So add those layers of thought to sustainability, environment, and society when you're building your solutions.
And then for someone who's not in tech, a user, right? Using ChatGPT, all other AI tools. I mean, how can they contribute? Can they contribute to a responsible AI world?
In some ways, yes. It's very much smaller because obviously it's scaled in terms of feedback loop. But you do have a say, right? I think one of the biggest say is your money is is your say. So if you don't think this company has ethical values, then just go somewhere else, right? Don't support a business you don't have belief in. Yeah, like that's your way of fighting the man.
And yep, I think that's how they can make an impact, right? By understanding where spending is going at.
What would make a platform stand out is if people trust it. And trust is going to be like the highest form of currency that we're going to have in the next decade. Because if everyone can build, then who should you trust? And I think that's why Carol is such a genius because she already knows this. She already knows this. And as a product person, she can build.
It's good what you mentioned about for the future founders, but I guess for normal citizens, the lesson here is you don't need authority to practice ethical AI, right? It's really just awareness and courage as well. So everyone can contribute. So yeah, really, really good conversation. This is a very empowering conversation, even for me as well, Carol. And just wanted to thank you for the time, sharing your wisdom. There's a bright future. If there's gonna be more people who's gonna be working on ethical AI, focusing on ethical AI like you.
Thank you so much, Carol, for spending more than 2 hours with us, discussing with us. And this has been so fruitful. This has been so eye opening. And we hope that this is not the last time that you join us for a conversation. And really, it's an honor to really celebrate you and highlight you in this regard.
Thanks for letting me talk a lot and for being interested in this topic. So